Welcome to the SMIS training video series. In this lesson, we will cover the public behaviour form, incorrect usage of a level crossing sub-event. There are three types of incidents that you can add as the main event in the sub-event section of the public behaviour form. These are incorrect usage of a level crossing, person in a prohibited area, and vandalism. In this lesson, we will introduce you to the incorrect usage of a level crossing sub-event. Before we look at the sub-event in SMIS, let's take a look at the sub-event definition to understand what should be entered on this sub-event, including who should enter it. To do this, we need to head to the RSSB service desk. We are now in the Solutions area of the RSSB service desk. You can see at the top of the page, here we have Home, Solutions, SMIS Definitions, and SMIS sub-events. Let's head to the incorrect usage of a level crossing guidance section. First, you can find the definition, which reads, the deliberate or unintentional incorrect use of level crossings or their equipment where a railway line is crossed by a road vehicle or pedestrian without using the crossing correctly. Next, we have the SMIS reporting scope, which is an excerpt from Table B of the SMIS application matrix. Here we have the event category, description of reporting scope, input by, which tells you who would enter this type of event in SMIS. So here we can see that the responsibility lies with the infrastructure manager. And finally, we have the RIDDLE reporting requirements. In this case, there are no associated RIDDLE requirements except for the common regulations 4, 5, and 6, which can be reported on all sub-event forms. Next, we have a list of what type of events are included. So for example, under incorrectly using level crossing equipment, we have leaving the gates open or unlocked, nuisance calls to the signaller, or overtaking whilst crossing. We also have pedestrians or road vehicles crossing when unsafe, which is indicated by an approaching train, warnings, or signage. Next, we have the exclusions. So for example, if the event involved a person vandalising the level crossing, you should still use the public behaviour form, but instead you should use the vandalism sub-event. Finally, we have the event scenarios, which details some common events and best practice in terms of how you enter the various components of the event. Now that we understand what should be entered into SMIS on the level crossing misuse form, let's take a look at the sub-event on the public behaviour form. We'll start by looking at the public behaviour location section in relation to the level crossing misuse sub-event. So now we have opened the public behaviour form, and let's head over to the location section. Remember, we are just looking at this from the point of view of level crossing misuse. So for the majority of these events, the location type should be selected as level crossing, as shown here. The level crossing asset list pops up underneath, and then you can select the level crossing from the asset list. So for example, if I was going to select Watford North, if you can't find the location that you are after via the asset register, then you can raise a SMIS asset update request via the RSSB service desk. To raise a SMIS asset update request via the RSSB service desk, we start on the home screen here. We scroll down to Request to Service. Then from here, we scroll to SMIS asset update. And then we can enter the details for the level crossing in here. You then submit this by clicking on Place Request. Let's head over to the sub-event section, where we are going to add the level crossing misuse as the main public behaviour sub-event. So we can go to this section repeater here and add incorrect usage of level crossing. The first question that appears is the level crossing user type. We can also see here that there is a red bar, which reminds you to add respective people, groups, or vehicles in the person, trains, and objects section, depending on how you answer these. For example, if I was to select horse rider, then an additional question appears, which is riding or dismounted. If I was to select motorist, then 3 additional questions appear, which is in a road vehicle blocked back, or road vehicle grounded. However, for example, if I was to select pedestrian, then no additional questions will appear. The next question in this section is the side of approach question, which asks which side of the level crossing did the person approach from. Then we have the level crossing incorrect usage details section. The first question asks if the level crossing user crossed or entered the level crossing when a train was approaching. Next, we have the cross or enter when unsafe question, which asks if the level crossing user crossed or entered the level crossing when warnings were active or railway staff indicated that it was unsafe. Next, we have the incorrect usage type. Here you can select any options that apply. For example, we have the failed to call back the signaller after safely crossing type, or left the barriers or gates open or unlocked, or zigzagged around the barriers. If none of the options listed apply, then simply select the None Apply option. Next, we have the user trapped on level crossing question. And finally, we have the incorrect use of level crossing circumstances. This asks whether any of these circumstances were present close to the level crossing at the time of the event. This is an optional question, so can be ignored if none apply. Staying within the sub-event section, we will move down to prior sub-events, where you get to add 1 prior event if it led to the main event. You can add any of the currently available simplified SMIS sub-events as prior events if one of these has led to the main public behaviour event. An example of a prior event to an incorrect usage of a level crossing would be a railway infrastructure fault, say if a level crossing barrier fails in the down position, leading to a vehicle swerving around the barrier to avoid waiting. So in this case, you would select yes for prior sub-event, and then you can add the prior event under the section repeater. So here I can find railway infrastructure fault. Lastly, we will look at the people, trains, and other objects in relation to the incorrect usage of a level crossing sub-event, where I'm going to point out some of the more common objects that you would be expected to record, including the roles that you would select. So let's go to the people, trains, and other objects section. You can add any of these people, trains, and other objects using this section repeater here and selecting this down arrow. If we go through some examples, first looking at if you were to enter the person who misused the level crossing, you would select the role that they played as driver of a vehicle, if they were driving a road vehicle to cross, or used/misused a level crossing. If you were to enter a group, for example, youths dangling from level crossing barriers, you would enter the role as used/misused a level crossing. In the case of a road vehicle, swerving around the level crossing barriers, you can add the road vehicle, and the role would be being driven and used/misused a level crossing. Now, in terms of adding the level crossing as an item or structure, you don't need to add it again in the people, trains, and other objects section, as you have already added the level crossing details by the asset list in the location section. The only time you would consider adding the level crossing in this section is if, say, it was struck by a vehicle, where you could add the level crossing as an item or structure. Here, you would enter the role as struck or struck by a vehicle, and then you would enter the level crossing by selecting the item or structure type as structure. The specific structure type is level crossing, and then you can enter the specific level crossing using the level crossing asset list here. So if I was to enter Watford North again, I would enter it like so. Finally, let's go through some of the more common possible causes for the incorrect usage of a level crossing sub-event. So we can go to the possible causes section and open the search bar here. Now, incorrect usage of a level crossing possible causes are quite unique in that it has its own set of level crossing use causes, which are located under human performance factors, then non-work related activities, then level crossing use. So this category is always a good starting point when searching for level crossing misuse related causes, although this does not mean that a level crossing misuse cause must be selected from this category. Some of the top common level crossing misuse causes include misjudgment of the time needed to cross, misunderstanding of level crossing warnings, to avoid waiting, and unaware of approaching train. Now, there are other common possible causes in other sections. For instance, under antisocial behaviour, there is thrill-seeking or leisure activity, and under suicide and self-harm, there is suicide or attempted suicide. It is also worth noting that although it is only really applicable in conjunction with a railway operating incident occurring, say if a member of staff makes an error which leads to a person incorrectly using the level crossing, there are also a set of level crossing related causes to look out for, and these come under human performance factors, which is the section we are in now, then railway operational activities, then operating level crossings, and then the additional common causes lie in here. That concludes this lesson. Now test your knowledge by taking the self-assessment quiz.